The cold had stopped being painful hours ago. Now it just was. A living thing pressed against Elena's skin, seeping through her torn cloak, settling into her bones. She kept one hand locked against the swell of her belly, fingers splayed wide as if she could shield the 6 frantic heartbeats fluttering beneath her palm from the wolves, hunting her through the storm. 6. The healers had called her a liar, then cursed. Then they'd driven her into the snow to die. Behind her, cutting through the howl of wind, came the hunting calls. Deep, resonant, promising blood. Her former pack had been tracking her for 5 days. Ever since she'd fled the last village that refused her shelter. They wanted her dead. More specifically, they wanted what was inside her dead. 6 impossible lives that broke every law of nature the packs had known for generations. Elena's boot caught on something beneath the snow. She went down hard, knees slamming frozen ground with enough force to punch air from her lungs. Pain exploded through her swollen body. Her hands flew protectively to her belly as tears froze on her cheeks. "Get up," she commanded herself. "Get up now. They're close. If you stay down, they'll tear these pups from your body before your heart stops." The memory of her mate's face flickered through her mind. Gentle eyes, calloused healer's hands. The way he'd wept with joy when the impossible pregnancy took hold. He'd died before he could even mark her properly. Killed in a border skirmish. Leaving her alone with 6 lives growing inside her that no one believed could survive. "They're wrong," she whispered into the storm, forcing her legs to move. "You're real. You're alive. I won't let them take you." She staggered through knee-deep drifts, her wolf conserving every scrap of strength to protect the lives within. Then she saw them. The stones. Ancient grave markers carved with runes she couldn't read. Weathered symbols that pulsed with faint warning even through the snow. Border markers. She'd heard the stories. Northern Crown territory, ruled by Alpha King Dominic, a man known not for mercy, but for iron law and swift justice. Trespassers were executed, but behind her the hunting howls grew louder, closer, more certain. Elena pressed her back against the largest stone, cradling her belly with both arms. Her legs wouldn't carry her further. Her wolf had gone silent. The 6 heartbeats beneath her hands were all that remained. Shapes emerged from the storm. Massive wolves with glowing eyes, circling with predatory patience. She recognized the lead wolf's scarred muzzle. He'd been the one who called her cursed, who suggested they end the abomination before it could take root. Then the air changed. New wolves materialized from the opposite direction. Larger, silver-pelted, moving like liquid moonlight through the snow. The black wolves froze, their hunting circle breaking as the silver wolves formed a wall between Elena and death. The largest silver, Wolf stepped forward. Even through her fading consciousness, Elena felt the weight of his presence. Ancient. Absolute. Terrifying. He shifted, and the world tilted. The man before her was carved from winter itself. Tall, broad-shouldered, with silver-threaded black hair and scars that mapped violence across his bare chest despite the freezing wind. Alpha King Dominic, the black wolves stood frozen in what looked like terror. Dominic didn't acknowledge them yet, his molten silver eyes locked on Elena, specifically on the swell of her belly beneath her protective arms. "How many?" His voice was low, rough, cutting through the storm like a blade. Elena's lips were numb. She should lie. Say 1, maybe 2? Something believable. But his eyes held hers with such unwavering focus that the truth fell from her frozen mouth before she could stop it. 6. The word dropped into the snow like a stone into still water. Silence. Even the wind seemed to pause. The lead black wolf shifted. "Alpha, King Dominic," he rasped carefully. "This Omega is pack business. She has trespassed on your lands while fleeing lawful—" "Quiet." One word, barely louder than a breath. The warrior's mouth snapped shut. Dominic moved then, but instead of grabbing her throat or calling for execution, the Alpha King of the Northern Crown did something impossible. He went to one knee in the snow. He placed one large, scarred hand against the snow near her belly, his head tilting slightly, his eyes closed. The silver wolves behind him went utterly still, their ears pricked forward, bodies vibrating with barely contained energy. Seconds stretched. Then Dominic's eyes opened, and something raw flickered across his face before his expression hardened into iron certainty. "I hear them," he said quietly, wonder threading through his voice. 6 heartbeats. Strong. Elena's wolf stirred for the first time in weeks, a faint, tentative response to power that didn't feel like a threat. Dominic rose to his full height and turned toward the black wolves. The temperature dropped another 10 degrees. "You have 3 seconds to leave my territory," he said, his voice carrying absolute authority. "If you're still breathing my air on the 4th, I will personally ensure you stop breathing entirely." "Alpha King, you don't understand. She's an abomination." The largest silver wolf snarled, lips pulling back from teeth the size of daggers. The grizzled warrior stumbled backward. "This isn't over." "Yes," Dominic said softly, dangerously. "It is." The black wolves fled into the storm. Elena tried to speak, tried to thank him or ask what happened next, but her body had reached its limit. Her vision tunneled, her legs buckled. Strong arms caught her before she hit the ground. Dominic lifted her as if she weighed nothing, cradling her against his chest with unexpected gentleness. His body was furnace hot against her frozen skin. "Stay with me," he commanded. And it wasn't a request. When Elena's eyes opened again, she was staring at an ornate ceiling carved with silver inlaid moons. Silk sheets covered her body. Warmth surrounded her. The scent of pine wood and winter storms filled her lungs. And beside her bed, standing like a sentinel carved from stone, was the Alpha King who had rebuilt the world in 3 seconds flat. The palace was beautiful, the way a blade was beautiful, all sharp edges and cold perfection. Elena moved through corridors lined with warriors who watched her like she might explode, their hands never far from their weapons. "The healers are waiting," her guard said, a female warrior with ice-blue eyes and a permanent scowl. The healing chamber smelled of sage and moonflower. 3 healers waited inside, all wearing silver crescent pins that marked them as court-appointed. Their expressions ranged from clinical curiosity to barely concealed revulsion. "Lie down," the eldest commanded. Elena obeyed, her hand instinctively covering her belly as they approached. The healers worked in silence, their hands glowing faint blue as they channeled their gifts. The eldest healer pulled back sharply, her face draining of color. "Blessed moon," she whispered. "It's true." "What's true?" the male healer demanded, pushing forward. His magic swept over Elena's belly and he froze. That's impossible." 6, the second woman breathed. 6 distinct heartbeats. 6 complete souls. The room went silent. "When was the last silver litter?" 89 years ago, the male healer replied, voice shaking. "The moon sextuplets. He trailed off. "They what?" Elena asked, her wolf stirring uneasily. No one answered. By evening, the entire court knew. Elena could feel the weight of their stares as she was escorted to the dining hall, not to eat with the court, but to be presented. Dominic sat at the head of a massive table, his expression unreadable as nobles, and warriors filled the space with barely controlled chaos. "Prophecy!" someone hissed. "Abomination," another countered. "The texts speak of silver litters, children born to reshape power itself. The texts also speak of how they tear kingdoms apart." Elena stood frozen as factions formed before her eyes. Some nobles looked at her with reverence, even hunger. Others with naked fear. Dominic hadn't spoken. He simply watched, tracking every reaction, cataloging every revealed loyalty. "She's manipulated him somehow," a voice carried from older nobles. "Look at her. A broken Omega with a fantastical story. The Alpha King never would have—" "Mind your tongue," Dominic said softly. The entire hall went silent. "Or lose it." But the damage was done. Elena felt it settling into her bones. The suspicion, the accusation. They thought she'd seduced him, bewitched him, used her impossible pregnancy to gain power she had no right to claim. A sharp pain lanced through her belly. Elena gasped, her hand flying to her stomach as something twisted wrong inside her. Not labor. Something else. Something cold spreading through her veins like poison. "What?" she started, but another wave hit, stronger, and her knees buckled. Dominic was there before she hit the ground, moving with impossible speed. "The healers," he commanded. "Now." The eldest healer arrived within seconds, her face grave as her magic swept over Elena. "My lord," she said carefully, "the palace wards. They're rejecting her." Explain? The stones were built to suppress rare bloodlines, to prevent unnatural succession. Her pregnancy is, the healer hesitated. The palace itself is trying to end it. If she stays here, the pups will die. Dominic's expression turned to stone. Then the palace is wrong. The bleeding started at dawn. Elena woke to warmth spreading between her thighs. Not the wet heat of water breaking, but the slow, terrifying crimson of something going catastrophically wrong. She pressed her hand to her belly, feeling the 6 heartbeats that had been so strong yesterday, now fluttering weakly, irregularly. "No," she whispered. "No, no, no." The healers came quickly. "The wards are ancient," the eldest explained as Dominic stood rigid beside Elena's bed. "Built during the succession wars, designed to prevent pregnancies that could threaten the natural order of power." 6 pups, she shook her head. The stones read it as threat. They're actively working against her body. "How long?" Dominic's voice was carefully controlled, but Elena could hear fury coiled beneath it. 3 days, maybe 4. Then the pups will be too weak to survive. Solutions. Now. Move her to a village outside the ward boundaries. "No," another healer interrupted. "She's too weak to travel. Moving her now could trigger full labor. None of the pups would survive." The door burst open. Court members flooded in, all talking over each other. "This is a sign. The stones themselves reject this unnatural. We should move her immediately. The bloodline must be preserved." "End it," someone hissed from the back. "End the pregnancy before it kills her and solves our problem cleanly." The room exploded into arguments. "Out!" Dominic's roar silenced them all. They fled. Silence settled over the room like snow. "I'll leave," Elena said quietly. "Tonight. I'll take my chances on the road. You won't make it a mile. Then I'll die trying instead of lying here while your palace murders my children." Dominic moved to the window, his back rigid. "The stones are older than my bloodline, older than the crown. They've stood for 4 centuries. Then I'm sorry for the inconvenience of dying in your guest room." He turned, and the expression on his face stole her breath. Not anger. Something raw and almost fragile. "You think I would let that happen? What choice do you have? You said it yourself. The stones are ancient. Immovable. Nothing is immovable." He crossed to her bedside, kneeling so their eyes were level. "You carried 6 lives through winter and wolves and rejection. You survived when the entire world wanted you dead." His hand hovered near hers, not quite touching. "Those pups have the strongest mother I've ever encountered. They deserve to live." Elena felt tears burning behind her eyes. "They deserve a mother who isn't trapped in a palace trying to kill them. They deserve a palace that doesn't try to kill them. She laughed bitterly. And how exactly do you plan to achieve that miracle? Dominic stood, his expression shifting from vulnerability to absolute determination. You'll stay in this room. You'll eat. You'll rest. You'll keep those pups alive. Dominic, that's an order. You can't just command the stones to... I'm not commanding the stones. His eyes blazed silver. I'm commanding every mason, every runesmith, every architect in my kingdom. He moved toward the door. If the palace won't protect my future, then I'll build one that will. Wait, what are you saying? He paused at the threshold. I'm saying the stones have 3 days to change. His smile was sharp as winter. Or I'll tear them down myself. The hammering started before sunset. From her window, Elena watched as sections of the palace were carefully dismantled, not destroyed, but methodically taken apart by craftsmen who moved with reverent precision. Runesmiths traced glowing patterns in the air, testing magical flows, mapping suppressant energies woven into the foundation. The eastern wing is worst, Dominic said 3 days later, appearing in her doorway covered in stone dust. Built during the succession wars specifically to prevent multiple births. We've redirected it entirely. You're actually doing this, Elena's voice caught. You're rebuilding a 400-year-old palace because it was wrong. He crossed to her window, standing close enough that she could feel his warmth. The stones were laid in fear. Fear of power. Fear of change. Fear of anything that couldn't be controlled. His hand rested on the windowsill beside hers, not quite touching. I won't rule through fear. Below, workers installed massive moonwood beams, their silver grain catching the fading light. 6 cradles, Dominic continued quietly. Carved from moonwood harvested during the last lunar eclipse. They'll be placed beneath an open skylight so the moon can touch your children before the world does. Elena's breath caught. Why? Why what? Why are you doing this? I'm nobody. An Omega who stumbled across your borders half dead. You could have turned me away, executed me for trespassing. Dominic turned to face her fully, and the intensity in his silver eyes made her wolf surge forward. The palace exists to serve the crown. The crown exists to protect the future. You are carrying 6 futures. He took her hand, the first time he'd truly touched her beyond carrying her unconscious body. Every time I close my eyes, I hear their heartbeats. 6 lives fighting to exist in a world that wants them dead. His grip tightened slightly. If I do nothing, I'm no different than the wolves who hunted you. No different than the healers who called you cursed. I won't be that king. Elena felt something crack open in her chest. Not breaking, but blooming. Thank you, she whispered. Dominic's thumb brushed across her knuckles once before he released her hand. Don't thank me yet. We still have work to do. The conspiracy met in a chamber that didn't officially exist. Lord Casimir, eldest of the noble houses, spread a map across the table. The full moon rises in 2 days. The Alpha King will be in the Eastern Territories suppressing the rebellion. A rebellion you orchestrated, another noble observed dryly. A rebellion that was necessary. Casimir's eyes were cold. Dominic has lost his mind, tearing apart our ancestral palace for an Omega carrying abominations. He's made us weak. The black wolves will breach the outer walls here. He traced a line on the map. We'll ensure the gates remain unguarded during shift change. They'll reach the Omega's chamber before anyone realizes what's happening. And if they're questioned, they won't survive long enough to be questioned. Casimir's smile was thin. We'll arrive just in time to defend the palace. The Omega and her unnatural brood will be dead. Dominic will return to find his mad project ended. He'll know we betrayed him. He'll suspect, but he won't have proof. The letter was dispatched within the hour. Elena woke to wrongness. Not pain. Not yet. But a sense of disturbance that made her wolf pace restlessly. The palace grounds were too quiet. Guards sparse, shadows too deep, in places that should have been lit. She pressed her hand against the new stone wall and felt something impossible. The palace was humming. Not the cold, suppressant pulse of old wards, but something warm, responsive, almost aware. Dominic had built her a palace that would recognize her as its heart. A cramp twisted through her belly, sharp but brief. Not labor, not yet, but a warning. Not tonight, Elena whispered. Please, not tonight. Your father isn't here. Another cramp, stronger. She stumbled to the door. The corridor was empty. No guard, no servants, just shadows and moonlight and silence. Wrong. She grabbed the knife Dominic had left on her nightstand and positioned herself between the door and the cradles. The palace hummed louder, its magic resonating through the stones. Another cramp seized her, and this time accompanied by warmth that might have been water breaking or might have been blood. Not now, she gasped. Please, not. The war horn sounded. 3 long, desperate blasts. The attack had begun, and somewhere in the distance, too far away to help, Dominic would be hearing those horns and realizing he'd been played. Elena's water broke fully. Labor had begun. She was alone. The gates opened from the inside. Black wolves flooded the palace grounds like a dark tide. Another contraction tore, through her, and she doubled over, clutching the edge of a moonwood cradle. "My lady!" Her guard burst through the door, bloodied and wild-eyed. "We have to move you." "I can't," Elena's voice came out as a growl. "They're coming now." "Then I'll hold the door." The warrior shifted into a massive gray wolf, positioning herself at the threshold. Elena staggered to the birthing bed, low and wide, positioned directly beneath the open skylight, where moonlight poured down like liquid silver. The palace hummed around her, its new wards resonating with her pain, her fear, her fierce determination. "Please," she thought desperately. "Dominic built you to protect us. So protect us." The black wolves reached her corridor. Her guard met them with savage fury, taking down the first 2 before numbers overwhelmed her. 3 wolves crashed through the doorway. The lead wolf shifted into the grizzled warrior who'd wanted her dead from the beginning. "Finally!" he rasped, drawing a silver blade. "Time to end this abomination." He stepped across the threshold. The palace ignited. Silver light exploded from every surface. Walls, floor, ceiling, burning with lunar fire that responded not to ancient protocols, but to the Omega giving birth beneath the skylight. The wards Dominic had rebuilt recognized her blood, her pain, her children fighting to enter the world. The warrior screamed as silver fire consumed him from the inside out. His companions tried to retreat, but the threshold had become a barrier of pure, burning magic. They died before they reached the corridor. Elena barely noticed. The first pup was crowning, and the pain whited out everything else. She bore down, screaming her defiance at the moon and the battle and the world that wanted her children dead. The first pup slid into her hands. Tiny, perfect, wailing with fierce life. A girl. Elena had no time to do more than ensure the pup was breathing before the next contraction hit. She laid her daughter in the first, cradle and surrendered to her body's demands. More wolves tried to breach the chamber. The palace burned them all. Silver light cascaded through corridors like a living thing, seeking out threats, igniting anything that meant harm. The second pup, a boy. The third, another girl. Elena's world had narrowed to pain and purpose. The battle sounds changed. A roar split the night, deeper, more primal than any wolf she'd heard before. Dominic had returned. She felt him through the palace itself, through the wards keyed to her blood that recognized him as protector, as mate, as the one who'd rebuilt the world for her children. He tore through invading wolves like a force of nature. The fourth pup began to crown as Dominic reached her corridor. He shifted mid-run, bursting through the doorway covered in blood that wasn't his eyes wild until they found her, alive, fighting, bringing their future into the world despite the chaos. "You came back," Elena gasped. "Always." He moved to her, sighed, his hand finding hers as another contraction hit. "I will always come back." The fourth pup, a boy, was born into his father's hands. Dominic placed him gently in his cradle, then returned to Elena's side as the fifth contraction built. The fifth pup, another girl, came with fierce determination. Then the final contraction. Different. Stronger. Urgent. The last child fighting hardest of all. Elena bore down with everything she had left. The sixth pup, the smallest, a girl with silver-touched fur, slid into the world as the full moon reached its zenith. Her cry echoed through the palace like a bell, and every remaining invader fell where they stood. 6 lives born. 6 futures secured. The battle was over. Elena collapsed back against blood-soaked pillows, trembling with exhaustion so profound she could barely keep her eyes open. But she forced them to stay focused on the 6 cradles arranged in a perfect circle beneath the skylight. 6 heartbeats that had sustained her, through winter and wolves and rejection. 6 lives that had reshaped a kingdom. Dominic knelt beside the birthing bed, still covered in battle gore, his hand finding hers with gentleness that contradicted the violence carved into every line of his body. He pressed his forehead to her knuckles and breathed. Warriors flooded in, weapons drawn, then stopped dead at the threshold. 6 pups. All breathing, all alive. The wolves, Dominic's elite guard who'd fought their way back with him, did something Elena had never seen. They bowed, not to Dominic, to her, to the children. "Crown-born," one whispered, and the words spread like wildfire. The healers came next, examining each pup with shaking hands. "Healthy," the eldest pronounced, her voice breaking. "All 6. Perfect." Movement at the door. Warriors dragged 3 nobles into the chamber. Lord Casimir and his conspirators. "The traitors, my lord," the captain reported. "They confess to opening the gates, to coordinating with the Black Wolves, to planning the Omega's murder." Dominic finally released Elena's hand and stood. The temperature dropped 10 degrees. "You conspired to murder an Omega in labor. You betrayed your oath, your kingdom, your crown." He stepped closer to Casimir. "Give me one reason I shouldn't execute you myself." Casimir's face twisted with defiance. "Because she's made you weak." Dominic's hand moved faster than thought, wrapping around the noble's throat. "She survived what would have killed anyone else. Carried 6 lives when the world said it was impossible. Gave birth during a siege while the palace burned around her." His grip tightened. "That's not weakness. That's strength you'll never comprehend." He released Casimir, letting him crumple to the floor. "Take them to the executioner's block. At dawn, let every noble, every warrior, every citizen see what happens to those who threaten the future of this kingdom." The traitors were dragged away. Dominic returned to Elena's side, his fury melting as he looked at their children. "They need names." "Tomorrow," Elena whispered, exhaustion claiming her. "Let them sleep tonight as they are. 6 hearts under one moon." Dominic pulled a chair to her bedside, his hand finding hers again. "Then I'll keep watch." "You need rest, too." "I'll rest when I know you're safe." His thumb traced gentle circles on her palm. "Sleep, Elena. I won't leave." She believed him. They carried her to the great hall on a litter draped in silver silk. Elena wore a gown the color of moonlight, her dark hair braided with winter flowers. Cradled in her arms was the smallest of her daughters, the sixth-born who'd fought hardest to enter the world. The great hall was packed. Every noble, every warrior, every citizen stood in absolute silence as she was brought before the dais where Dominic waited. He wore the full regalia of the Alpha King, black and silver, ancient and imposing, but his eyes were soft as they found hers. The litter was lowered. Elena stood on trembling legs and walked the final steps alone. The crowd held its breath. Dominic descended from the dais and before the entire kingdom went to one knee. Gasps rippled through the hall. "Elena," he said, his voice carrying to every corner despite its quietness. "You came to my borders hunted, rejected, carrying lives the world called impossible. You survived winter and wolves and a palace that tried to kill you. You gave birth during a siege and brought 6 perfect children into this world through strength I've witnessed in no warrior, no ruler, no legend." He took her free hand, pressing it to his forehead in profound reverence. "You are not an Omega under my protection. You are my mate, my equal, my Luna." He raised his head, his silver eyes blazing. "And any who doubt it can face me in challenge." No one moved. Dominic stood and turned to face the crowd. These 6 pups, these children born under a bleeding moon, surviving what should have been impossible, they are crown-born. The future of this kingdom flows through their veins. He gestured to where the other 5 pups rested in moonwood cradles. They will be raised not in the shadow of prophecy or fear, but in the light of what their mother taught us all. That strength is not about power, but survival. That love is not weakness, but the fiercest protection there is. A warrior stepped forward. "What shall we call them, my lord?" Dominic looked to Elena. "That choice belongs to their mother." Elena's throat tightened. She looked down at the tiny pup in her arms, then at the 4 others sleeping peacefully. "Arya," she said softly, naming the firstborn. "Kale, Selene, Rowan, Thorn." She kissed the forehead of the smallest. "And this one, Luna, for the moon that witnessed everything." "Arya, Kale, Selene, Rowan, Thorn, and Luna," Dominic repeated, his voice ringing through the hall. "The moon-born sextuplets, the children who remade the Northern Crown." The crowd erupted, not in polite applause, but in thunderous celebration. Warriors howled, nobles bowed, citizens wept. "Furthermore," Dominic said, his hands settling on the small of Elena's back, "this palace, rebuilt stone by stone to shelter the future instead of suppressing it, will no longer bear only my name." He turned to her. "It will be called the Palace of 6 Moons, so that every generation remembers the Omega who survived and the children who changed everything." That night, after the ceremony ended and crowds dispersed, Elena stood in her chamber beneath the open skylight. The 6 cradles were arranged in their circle, each pup sleeping peacefully, tiny chests rising and falling in perfect rhythm. She remembered kneeling in the snow with wolves circling, certain she would die. She remembered the healers who'd called her cursed, the villages that turned her away, the endless winter that had tried to claim her. She remembered collapsing against ancient border stones, accepting death, only to find salvation in silver eyes and impossible mercy. Dominic came to stand beside her, his arm wrapping around her waist. "They'll write stories about tonight," he murmured. Elena leaned into his warmth, watching moonlight paint silver across her sleeping children. "Let them," she whispered, because she had lived the impossible, and tomorrow she would do it again. If you enjoyed this story, smash that like button and let me know in the comments. Your support decides what story I tell next. Subscribe for more fantasy romance that rewrites the rules.